Are you looking for a fun and relaxing way to unwind after a long day? Well, then I have the thing for you. With just 2 brush strokes, you are going to be able to create flower buds that only take minutes to complete, and they will brighten up any space. Don't let the lack of experience hold you back from trying your hand at watercolor painting either. This beginner-friendly tutorial is the perfect way to dip your toes into the world of watercolor art. So what are we waiting for? Let's get started. First up, we need to gather a few supplies. We need some watercolor paper, watercolor paints, a paper towel, some clean water, and some brushes. Today I'll be using 3 out of the 5 brushes from my personally designed Craft-A-Mo brush set that I am pleased to announce will be available for purchase next month, this coming October. I have here a number 1 rigger, a number 6 round, and an angle brush, which is the key for today's painting. If you haven't done much with an angle brush yet, then my friend, this is a treat. I have a special unboxing and painting demonstration showing off all of these amazing brushes that I plan to share with you very soon, so keep an eye out for that. These brush sets are limited in number and will be sold on a first-come, first-served basis. I've had a lot of interest in these so far, and I think they may sell out fast. So don't forget to click on the Notify Me When Available link that I have listed in the description of this video, so you'll be one of the first ones to know when they are available. All right, I'm just going to tape my paper down with some artist tape and then we can get started. Also, really quickly, I do have a few simple pencil lines on my page that are just marking where I would like the stems of the flowers to go. This is not a necessary step, but it can help you plan out your composition and placement of the flowers. Again, nothing too fancy or complicated though, just some simple lines for the flower stems. I obviously don't have this painted quite yet, but after I do, I can trace my painting and create a more detailed outline for you that I can put on my Etsy shop if you find that helpful. I will also leave a link for that, as well as links and information to any of the products you see me using today. I'll have that listed in the description of this video. Okay, let's get into it. Now, if you'd rather, you can just skip to the part where I show you the 2 strokes you need to create the flower buds, but I thought it might be nice to create a painting out of this, so I'm going to add in a few extra details to really make this picture pop. First off, I'll grab a little bit of raw sienna to put here on my tray for a bit of background color. I'm going to keep this color a little bit watery so that it's lighter in value. I kind of just want a hint of this color. Then I'll take some clean water with my number 6 brush and paint a little bit of water in the bottom area of the page. I'm going to kind of just wet down the space where the flower stems will be. I'm not extending it up into the buds. Then after the area is wet down, I'll take some of that raw sienna and start placing in the color, spreading it throughout. You'll notice that as I go, I'm kind of keeping the darkest color near to the bottom of the page and then spreading and thinning that color outward and up. I don't mind having a few hard edges, but if you'd like to soften up some of the edges of this background a little bit, then you can use your paper towel and dab off just a bit of the water and color right at the edge. This really is a matter of preference as to the look you like. All right, after that background is completely dry, let's pull out the number 1 rigger and get a little bit of green color for some of the thin flower stems. I'm choosing to use a little bit of olive green today, but feel free to use whatever colors you like or have on hand. The great thing about this piece is that it really can be so versatile, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. Now, after I've got my olive green paint ready to go, I'll load my brush with color and carefully paint on the thin flower stems that I sketched out earlier. If you decided not to pencil in the stems, you can just go ahead and freehand paint them wherever you would like to now, or you can save the painting on of the stems until after you've painted the flower heads. But since I have a feel for where I want my stems to go, I'm going to go ahead and paint them on now and get a good majority of the background area finished. As a side tip, when painting these stem lines on, if it helps for some of these longer strokes, try moving your whole arm with the stroke rather than just your wrist to get a nice clean line. You also might notice that I'm painting these stems starting from the bottom of the page moving up. Sometimes it's helpful to paint them this way because your brush tends to have the most amount of paint on it right at the beginning, causing a heavier or more thick line. So when I start at the bottom and pull upward, that line will naturally tend to be a little thicker initially and then taper off as the line reaches the top. You also may see that I have a break in the middle of a couple of these lines. The reason I've done that is because I plan to have a flower head potentially overlapping that particular area. So instead of having a green line through my flower, I'm just playing it safe and planning around it. All right, that's probably all of the main flower stems that I need, but I may just add a few more thin grass marks in and around these as well for a bit more of an accent. I'll probably paint some of these thin lines using that same olive green, some with maybe the raw sienna that's already on our tray, and maybe even a mixture or blend of those two colors together. You're the artist here and you can play around with or paint whatever you feel like looks good. I personally love this rigger brush for things like this. It really makes painting these thin lines so quick and easy. In fact, it's almost difficult to not have these lines thin with this brush, making it perfect for grasses and stem lines. For a bit of extra added fun, I think I'll paint in a few tiny little grass buds, which is a nice way of saying some weeds, in the background as well. I'll use my number 6 brush and some of this raw sienna and just paint the heads or buds of these weeds really lightly so they don't become the focal point. These are just an accent to the piece to create a bit of interest. I'll just place these wherever I want. Some may work on some of the lines that I already have here, but if I want it in a spot that doesn't have a grass line, I'll just add that stem or grass line into it later. If you are enjoying and finding this tutorial helpful so far, I hope you'll consider subscribing so you can receive weekly painting tips that will help elevate your art skills to new heights. All right, well done. This really hasn't been too hard so far, and although you can do without this background altogether, I think it will add something special to the overall look of the piece. But now it's time for the fun part, our 2-stroke angle brush flower buds. I will be using only 2 colors for this. I've got a touch of Quinacridone rose here that is very light and watered down. I really don't want much of a color here. This is just a light base. We just want a small hint of it. Now let's place a little bit of alizarin crimson on our tray. This one we want to be a little darker and more concentrated in value, and you'll see why in just a minute. Now, before we paint on the first stroke for the flower bud, let me show you the technique we need to use for loading our brush with paint, because this is one of the keys to making this technique work. First off, we're going to load our brush with some of the very light and watered down Quinacridone rose. Then after that, we are going to swipe just the tip of the longer bristles into the darker alizarin crimson. This is the trick here. Don't pull all of the bristles through it, maybe just the longer half. Let me kind of pull the camera down for a more close-up look so that you can see this really well. Just like this, swipe right through to get some of this darker paint just on the end. Now let's go ahead and paint on the first stroke for the bud. You'll just hold your brush so that it feels like it's upside down with the longer point of the brush facing down. Then you'll place that point on the top of the stem that we have already painted on. Then you'll pull the brush out and around into a curved sort of letter C shape. As you get to the end or tip of the stroke, you'll turn your brush just a little bit so that the short or back end of the brush forms a bit of a point. This stroke may take a tiny bit of practice to get the hang of, so it may be a good idea to pull out a scrap piece of paper to just practice it over and over again until you've got it down. Now we're going to go ahead and paint this first stroke on all of these flower stems. Then we'll let them dry before moving on. All right, now that these first brush strokes are totally dry, we can add in the second brush stroke that finishes the bud shape off. The good news is we are basically going to do the same thing as we just did. This time, however, I want the stroke to be slightly different in value so it doesn't totally blend in with the first one. So instead of using the light watered down Quinacridone rose as the base color of my brush, I'm actually just going to use some of the pink tainted water. Then again, I'll swipe the tip of the brush through the alizarin crimson and paint on the second stroke in the same way as the first, except that it will be backwards this time and curve out the opposite way. As I paint this, I am kind of using the edge of the first petal to guide where I paint the second one. You'll see that the short end of my brush is just following right along the line where that first petal goes. Then I'll again turn my brush a little bit at the tip to make a bit of a point at the end. The fun thing about this is that with the way we load the brush, it sort of creates a subtle two-toned effect where the base is slightly darker in value and the tip is slightly lighter. This can be a really fun thing to try with totally different colors too. In fact, the effect shows even more with different colors compared to the pinks that I'm using today. I've tried this with yellow as the base and the alizarin crimson on the tips, and that is really beautiful also. Really, you can play around and test out any combination of colors that you want to try. I just happen to be in the mood to do the light and dark pinks today. Just look at how these turned out though. Look at this awesome two-toned effect we have going on. The petals have a nice gradient of color. They look very realistic, and we only did this literally with 2 strokes of the brush. All right, after that second stroke is completely dry, then we can add just a small finishing touch that really makes these buds pop. Using my number 6 brush, I'll add just a little bit of olive green at the base of the bud here to connect the petals to the stem. And as a fun option, you can add a little bit of greenery that spreads around the buds to make them look a little more like a rosebud. I kind of like to do at least 3 of these, maybe 4, one on each side and one in the middle. I am painting these also with just 1 stroke of the brush, starting out with a thin pointy tip and then pressing down on the bristles to make that stroke more broad and thick at the end. I'm taking my time with this. I'm not rushing and doing it wildly. I'm in full control of the brush, painting it on here exactly how I want so that it really sets off the bud and creates a lovely finishing product. These are really super easy to do after you've got this stroke down, and they are also very quick. They really only take minutes to do, and they are so versatile. You can paint this on a smaller scale with just a few buds to create a pretty little card, or you can paint a larger piece like today that can be a lovely decor piece for your home or a gift for a friend. And as I said before, any color is an option as well. I think the best part is that it looks like this was time-consuming and difficult when it's really not. People will just think you spent hours on this. But you know what? That's our little secret. Now, at this point, you really can call this piece done if you want to, but I'm going to add a few more little finishing touches. I think I'd like to add a little something more to the base area around the stems here. I'm just going to use that angle brush once again and use a light valued mixture of the olive green and raw sienna, and then paint in some broad leaf strokes. I'll hold the brush the same way as with the petals, with the point facing downward. I'll start with the brush a little turned to create a thin point first, then I'll twist the brush to the broad side to create a thicker stroke in the center, and then turn it back to the thin point for the tip of the grass. I chose not to do this on this particular piece today, but you can actually paint some leaves that resemble more of a rose leaf if you'd like. So many options. Really, you can do whatever you'd like. I think I like that added extra grass here at the bottom. There's just one more thing that I want to do, and then I will call this piece done. I'd like to add in a few more of those weed buds using a little bit of a darker color. I'll paint in the olive green tops first, and then add in some nice thin stem lines afterwards to connect them to the ground. I really love how this is turning out. It really didn't take much time either, and the options to add more, change things up, or even simplify this are really limitless. I'm really glad you joined me today. I hope you had some fun and maybe even learned something new. If you did enjoy this tutorial and would like to see more, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so that I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.